Hello, everyone. We are live. We are ready to go. Super excited to be here and this webinar with Patrick to talk about compensation and how that's going. But as we kind of let people start rolling in, trickling in, the first couple minutes are always just people trying to get that webinar link to work. I'd love to hear where you're coming from. What city you coming from? What the weather's like? And I'd say if you want, do you have a question about compensation that's just super burning that you'd like us to get to throughout the webinar? We'll make sure that we answer it. So come in with three things: where you're coming from, what the weather's like, and do you have something just burning desire that you need to know about compensation? We'll do our best to answer it. I'm here in Victoria, BC, Canada, on the West Coast, and we're actually getting a bunch of snow today, which is lovely, but also scary because West Coasters do not know how to drive in the snow at all. It just shuts the whole city down, and I'm sure it's the same in Vancouver as well.
I've heard Vancouver has one snowplow to the whole city. Is that true?
I think they've gotten a few more since climate change has made snow a bigger reality these days. But just watch some social media to see all the chaos that's happening on the hills. Always good times. But Patrick, what's it like over where you're at in Toronto?
Yeah, so Toronto's actually not bad. We got a little dusting of snow over the past couple of days, but it's certainly pretty manageable and pretty much in season for what we should expect. I can't complain. Certainly not like what the folks in Alberta or BC have been getting over the past couple of days.
No, or those East Coasters. I heard it's real bad out on the East Coast as well.
Yeah, winter just arrived all of a sudden here, which is great.
Awesome. But all right, I think let's start jumping into things. Let's get going. But again, welcome to the webinar. If this is your first time joining us and you don't know who I am, my name is Noah Warder. I'm the head of people here at Gusto, and I love to run these webinars because I get to talk to amazing, interesting people like Patrick and learn from them. I get to chat about compensation, benefits, leadership, all that great stuff over the past few years. And so I'm really, really excited to chat with Patrick about compensation. I think this is top of mind for a lot of people. It's the start of the year. Compensation adjustments are happening, all that fun stuff. But in Canada and in many states in the US, transparent compensation is becoming more of a topic. It's becoming legislated. It's becoming more desired. Candidates are starting to ask for it more and more. And so I think this is a hot topic. I'm excited to chat about it, but also talk about more than just the base salary. So kind of with that, I'm going to turn things over to Patrick to kind of introduce himself, kind of why they started Benefi and what his background is. So Patrick, kind of let us know what's happening over there.
Yeah, thanks. Super excited to be here. I know we've got a great group on the line, and super excited to have a chat with you, Noah. So, hey, everybody, I'm Patrick Dunn. I'm founder of Benefi. Benefi is a platform that helps companies attract, retain, and engage talent by issuing and managing not only a better kind of signing and retention bonus, but also issuing and allowing opportunities for employees to further their education. My background, I'm a career insights, innovation, product development guy. I spent my whole career helping, companies create successful products and services. Before launching Benefi, I was an executive at Canada Life for many years as an AVP of innovation, where my focus was helping them create new products and services, especially around the group benefit space. And you asked about, how did I start Benefi? Most of my career has been, looking for problems that need to be solved, whether that's for a company or a consumer, looking for, pain points that exist across, their lives or their journeys, and thinking about how a company can help them solve that. And, years ago, it seemed like we had a big enough problem in kind of the employee engagement and recognition space that I left the company to launch Benefi, and here we are.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that little bit of a journey and where your background is. And we're really excited to talk to Patrick and Benefi. And I think they're doing some really cool stuff in that engagement space. And so before we can kind of get into that, I want to level set. I like to do this with most of my webinars when we're talking about a topic in particular of we're not just talking about when people hear compensation, they often just think of what is their salary. But compensation is so much more than just salary. Right? You get that kind of a life. What's the whole benefits, the total rewards? And so I'd love to hear from you what does that mean to you? Like, what does compensation, total rewards mean to you? What comes to mind when I say those words to you?
Yeah. So when I think about total rewards, I tend to think that this is a strategy, a holistic strategy that a company creates to attract talent, and it tends to involve all of the direct or indirect compensation that, and even non-monetary compensation that you might receive as a potential employee. So, not only is it your salary, but it's also your benefits programs and the other things in place to support you that might have a monetary component to it. Personally, I tend to separate, the intangibles like your company's culture as something which probably isn't included as part of this definition, but some people do. But I like to think it's really the monetary, either direct or indirect way of attracting talent to a company.
Yeah. It's all those things that you can kind of hold on to, of like my benefits that keep me healthy, my mental health perk that helps me stay sane, my, maybe you get a gym stipend or something, or a cell phone stipend, or your bonus. Those are all those things that people can kind of hold on to, and it's very easy to prescribe a dollar value to it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and something I think is really interesting, which seems to be emerging these days, are other elements which have a value to them, including things like workplace flexibility. Whether you're hybrid or remote or a combination of the two. And even things like career pathways, I would argue, should be included in this definition somewhere, because those ultimately have kind of a direct value to you as an employee, and I think should be part of the consideration set for companies going forward.
I love that you just called that out, because we know that so many people leave organizations when they don't feel like they're growing. Like, that's the number one reason people feel like either they're not growing or they don't have a clear path to grow
Mm.
or make more money or whatever it is. But I love that you called that out. That's so important. So, the title of this webinar is The Evolution of Compensation. And so, you've been in this space for a long time. You've seen how things have changed. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on, like, what has changed in this space? Why is this topic more important now than it has been in the past 5, 10 years? Yeah, why?
I think everybody on the line knows it has been a bonkers couple of years in the HR and compensation spaces. We don't have a lot of historical data to explain or refer to over what's happened over the past couple of years. And while things are like the employee turnover of let's say 2022, 2021 is slowing down a little bit for most organizations, I think we're seeing a bit of a sea change, like a permanent shift in the relationships that people have with their companies. The rise, whether or not you work in an industry that has, remote work, hybrid work or not, the rise of remote work has had an impact across a wide range of industries and even impacted those that don't have it. And when I think about what that has done, and we talk about some of the stats that we see that turnover is 40% higher compared to pre-pandemic levels, and it's taking roughly 20% longer to find people compared to pre-pandemic levels. I think about loyalty and the relationships that people build with their workplace. You're not loyal as an employee to a logo or a building or a reception desk or your cubicle. You tend to be loyal to your coworkers. You build relationships with your coworkers and probably your line manager. And in a scenario where you're seeing those people less, you're having fewer water cooler talks, you have fewer opportunities to have unstructured chat with them and build personal relationships with them. You can expect a decrease in those bonds. And for a company, like, that bond is worth something. It will keep you at a company and makes you a little less reliant on your salary. And subsequently, I mean, we've seen some really interesting stats evolve over the past couple of years. And a recent ADP study said, the number one driver of employee turnover over the past year has been compensation, bar none. I don't think that's super surprising in the economic climate we've had of inflation and rising food costs. Sure, you may really like your coworkers, but if you're having trouble putting the food on the table, you have to go somewhere else. And, we're continuing to see, even in 2024, some really interesting studies which state, um, you know, currently roughly 60% of the Canadian population is anticipating a pay raise. They're expecting something. And roughly 80% of the workforce is currently looking for a new job. That is crazy to me, in terms of the people who are out there fishing. Now, the sentiment we're seeing in terms of available opportunities is not as robust as the 8%. That 8% doesn't necessarily think they're going to find a job right away, and it differs a little bit by industry. But the fact is, those folks are looking, and it creates a bit of a challenge for employers to find a way to keep them around, especially because salary has jumped to the forefront in terms of what these folks are looking for. So it's a fascinating labor market, and there's a couple of differences across industries. It's not the same in every industry. Um, we see some certain industries like tech, which had kind of a bit of a lull in terms of how tight their labor market is, even some layoffs. But for so many others, and I'll point at medical in particular, it's really hard to find talent, really hard to keep them around, and this creates some really interesting opportunities for employers to get creative and keep people.
Yeah, I think that's the key term there is creativity. I think, so often, you don't, I'm going to say from like the people side of things, HR side of things, you don't always get the budget that you were hoping to get to put towards salaries. And, I talk about this with a lot of my colleagues of like, there is always this huge emphasis on what is your base salary? What is that? What is that? And like you spoke to it, compensation is huge for people. It's the number one driver. If you can't pay your bills, you're going to go somewhere that can afford you to pay your bills. Doesn't matter what the culture is like, or what all the perks and benefits are. But if you can hit that sort of bar where everyone's like, okay, I'm safe. I'm making enough money to pay my bills and maybe put a little bit away. At that point, you can get really creative with what you're doing outside of that base pay that doesn't always cost as much. Like taking 1% of like total payroll and putting it into another program is way more impactful than just giving everyone a 1% raise. Because like, most people will just be angry that they got that. It's almost worse than giving them nothing.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, what is this? This is I'm literally getting $10 more a paycheck. This is absolutely nothing.
Yeah. What's interesting, we've also seen a shocking trend, which seems to be slowing a little bit now, but there was this huge influx of people changing their jobs for a relatively low increase in salary over the past year. Apparently 2 or 3% or 4% was enough to lever people out of an existing job into somewhere else, which doesn't sound like a lot, but especially in things like fully remote work, if you don't have those bonds, one Zoom call looks like any other Zoom call. Why wouldn't you change your job for a 3% or 4% increase in salary somewhere else? Just because it's good. You could, and it was easy to do so.
Yeah.
That's slowing a little bit now.
Yeah. And especially if the benefits packages are the same. Like if it's like relatively benefits are the same, culture looks the same. I'm working on relatively the same projects. Like, why wouldn't I jump for another 4%? That's not nothing. Yeah. Amazing. So I'd say like let's talk about what does a successful program look like? Like how can people get creative? And what are like some companies doing that really sets them apart in their industry? Like I'd love, like you've got a nice, eagle eye view of what's happening out there in the industries, cross industries. And so I'd love to hear, like what are those successful programs? Who's doing it the best? And you don't have to give us names. And if you want to give us names, that's great. And what is it about them that makes them so successful?
Yeah, if you wanted a kind of a blanket statement, it seems like there's no silver bullet, and there's a reason for that. Where when I think about, um, you know, creating a meaningful relationship or solving a real problem for employee, not all employees are the same, and you may have very different needs across, your new hires versus your established employees versus your executive team. And finding something which speaks to all of them, I think, is a challenge for a lot of organizations. I will give a little shout out to signing and retention bonuses because that's of course part of what we do. What I will say is that tool has really exploded over the past, 24 months. They're up 454% over the past year, according to Robert Half, with a third of companies in Canada now offering them, and a third in the US as well. And they're kind of a neat tool for companies because they do a couple of things. If you're communicating them in the right way, they send a message to the employee that, hey, we really like you, we value you, we know there's financial pressures right now, and we want to get you in the door, and get you working here. And what it does is kind of kicks the inflation conversation down the road a year, where you can kind of say, hey, we don't know what's going to happen, related to the economy, related to salary increases. We want to put more money in your hands right now to deal with the stress, and we can kind of look at what the market looks like a year from now to review salary. And they also get really powerful if you're talking about a longer term career conversation and creating a pathway for the individual within your organization to evolve, a year or two down the road. Because you can structure the conversation like, look, we see a future for you at this organization. We'd like to see you doing X or Y a year from now, or we'd like to have a conversation about where you would like to be a year or two from now. And if you're creating a kind of a talent marketplace within your organization and some built-in flexibility around labor mobility, it's kind of a nice tool to get somebody to, learn the ropes, learn whatever they need to learn over the first year or two, and then kind of build them up into a longer-term employee, as opposed to the really high 6 months minus turnover that a lot of industries are seeing amongst new hires. So it does create some stickiness for you to continue to level up an employee. But to kind of fully answer your question, what are successful firms doing? There does seem to be a lot of opportunity, and again, addressing a really good problem that an employee has across those different life stages and offering them a solution that addresses it. And I know that's a really, really high level answer, but we've seen companies try a lot of different things over the past year that seem to have, on an ad hoc basis or an individual basis, really good success. And I might point out, Canada Life launched a really good student debt relief program, which has seen some really good really good usage. I know there's been some really interesting benefits related to fertility, that provide opportunities for people to improve their fertility rates. And on a blanket across all your employee base, those things aren't super interesting for 80%. But for that 20%, they really hit home on an issue that you might have as an individual. And your company being able to help you out with that, make it really attractive. And I think the opportunity is for an organization to make sure you're solving issues across your employee base, that you're offering something attractive and meaningful for individuals across that spectrum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's and I've seen other people talk about this. It's really designing and building flexible benefits and total rewards packages to kind of meet people where they're at, because you need to have a parental leave policy because there's going to be people in your organization who will need that, but not everyone in your company. Like I've talked to executives about this, like, well, it's going to be so expensive. It's like, do you expect everyone in the company to take this at the same time? Like, no, you're going to have depending on the size of your organization, you're going to have 1 or 2%, maybe 3% of your population base utilizing this at any given time. So it's not super expensive because it's minor utilization. And then the other thing is I know more and more companies are pairing a benefits package where it gets you all of your extended medical coverage, but then pairing that with flexible spending accounts for all of your paramedical, vision, intangible stuff, wellness spending, that stuff there, where so people can be like, well, I don't need glasses, so the vision thing in our benefits program doesn't help me, so I don't care about that. But I just get a lump sum of money and I can spend it on I really like massage or acupuncture, or I'm going to spend it on my gym membership or whatever. Where the person who's like, no, I need new glasses every year. That's important to me. I'll take that chunk of money and spend it over here.
I really like that. You said meet employees where they're at. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, meet them where they're at.
I love it. I think that's a great encapsulation of the point. And before I forget, I also wanted to point out, And, a really good comment from Tyler Sharp on the flexibility and learning opportunities are huge for her. Going back to your question about what programs are really working, definitely, opportunities to leverage talent mobility across career journeys in a company seem to be really critical. I have a conspiracy theory about this. I think, um, you know, COVID, one of the many things it did to us is it gave people a little sense of their own mortality. You were getting sick, people were getting sick. You may have known somebody who died, or your cousin's aunt or somebody who had died. And we saw a lot of people doing some soul searching where they're saying, well, is this job really what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Maybe I want to move to Halifax and launch an Airbnb or something like that. There was a lot of people moving across the country and rethinking their career choices. And subsequently, I think that's kept with us a little bit. I think it's driving a little bit of the turnover, and being able to sit down with employee and craft a meaningful career path within the organization seems to be working really well for certain organizations. That if you're able to offer, the opportunity to learn a new skill, whether it's kind of a parallel transfer, you're going from data science to accounting or vice versa, or career advancement if you're meeting certain education and competency goals. That seems to be adding months, if not years, to expected retention for certain organizations we've been speaking with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I always say this, like if you're as an organization willing to invest in the employees, they're gonna invest back into the organization. And it's very much like a win-win. And I know a lot of companies are really scared about this, and they put in all these big clawback clauses and all this kind of stuff. And it's like you generally don't need that. If you just show true investment and appreciation, and I think also be upfront with people of like, we realize that, for most people, you're not going to stay here for 20 years, and that's okay. We want you to stay for 5. And that would be awesome for both parties. And we're going to invest in your career during that time. And we hope that you invest in the organization during that time as well. I think more people and more organizations are kind of getting okay with that, of like, we don't expect people to, start here at 19 and retire here at age 65 anymore. That doesn't exist in our world of work anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
The age of joining GM fresh out of school, or not even graduating from high school or from whatever, and joining GM and staying there until you're 60 doesn't seem to be a common career path anymore.
No, and it's in the world of layoffs, and layoffs happening so much more often, people can't. It's too risky. They have to be able to make sure that they can make adjustments and changes. But I wanted to jump back to one thing that you said at the beginning, where using these retention bonuses and signing bonuses to bring people in and then help level them up. And I want to double down on that a little bit more, because it's not super clear to me what that means. And so I'd love for you to give me an example of what that looks like in an organization, of like, how do you use a signing bonus or retention bonus to do that? What is the mechanics behind it? How could someone craft that type of program in their own organization and kind of show the ROI to their executive team or their finance team?
Yeah, great question. And I'll be talking about the traditional use case and then kind of a new use case, if that's okay. And, I think of a case study of one of our clients. They're a hospital chain off of the 401. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And, they have a tough time hiring, nurses and personal support workers, and that sort of thing. As an aside, according to the jobs board Indeed, there isn't a job that exists that has a higher incidence of signing bonuses than nurses. There's nothing else out there. If that gives you kind of a taste of how tight that labor market is. But these guys, again, in the middle of nowhere, have the challenge in hiring nurses that every hospital has, but they also have the additional challenge of actually trying to recruit people to their region, which means you have moving costs. A new nurse is putting first and last month's rent down on a new apartment, or moving costs, and then you're probably buying a car, because if you're not taking the transit system of the other big cities, you're probably having to drive in this region. So you've got thousands of dollars of upfront costs for a new nurse to move to your region, and this is arguably a barrier to joining them. And a signing bonus, a really good signing bonus, is actually a good way to overcome some of those issues. in a way that is going to get people working for your organization, and structured in the right way is going to help retain them for a certain period of time. It's a win-win for everybody. So that's kind of the traditional use case. If you're in an industry that, again, has those barriers to entry, and especially if you're hiring, younger employees, newcomers to the country in some cases have a terrible time getting affordable credit because of a lack of a credit score. This the way our FICO credit scoring works here in Canada. Or, if you have kind of established hires who are leaving salary on the table at their old organization. If you're competitively poaching somebody and they're leaving commissions or bonuses on the table at an old job, signing retention bonuses are a great way to get them in the door and make it a great experience for everybody. But to fully answer your question, we've got a really great use case that we're expanding with a couple clients here at Benefi. A couple months ago, somebody approached us and said, "Hey, instead of giving somebody a signing bonus as cash, can we use that money to fund employee education?" And the answer is absolutely yes. And since that time, we've established a relationship with a number of colleges and universities across Canada. We create a little catalog and allow employers the ability to essentially select or offer certain courses and degrees through the platform. And potentially de-risk it with the Benefi platform as well, which includes potentially a retention clause, which is, of course, optional if the employer wants or not. And we think this is a great way to culturally show an employee that you're really willing to invest in them as a person, that you see value in who they are, and you potentially see a role for them in the organization, 2 or 3 years down the road. And, it ties in really nicely to that kind of career pathway conversation, where, you may be a frontline teller today, but in a couple of years, we'd like to see you as, a data scientist or something within the organization. And more than anything else, that seems to create a really valuable feeling and relationship between the employer and the employee, because not only does the company potentially care about me, but they see a future for me, and I have an avenue for growth. And that feels like a really powerful conversation for most companies.
I love that you brought that up, and you can apply this across organizations. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's only for executives," or "Oh, that's only for like your director levels." But it's like, no, you could do this for your frontline staff. That is, I know frontline retention is abysmal in these days. And trying to keep those people that keep the store running day in and day out. It's really hard to keep those people. But if you can, like you said, show them a path for career advancement, whether that's store management or regional management, or completely getting out of the front line and moving to a corporate position where it's software development, because every company in the world now needs to have some sort of software developer team, or design, or data science, or security. There's so many ways that you can invest in people to fill the jobs that you're going to need in a couple of years. They already know the brand, they already know the company, there's less ramp up time, and the loyalty has already been proven, and they know that the company will be loyal to them, and they will reciprocate that loyalty in those sort of investments that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I love that. I love, what I think you're really talking about is personalized and an individual approach to the employee, where they themselves can kind of feel that relationship is being built. I think that feels really powerful to me.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think it's great. So, we've kind of talked a little bit about total rewards, best in class, creative solutions, but it's not always easy, especially in this current climate, to try and add more programs into your total rewards offerings, and get those different levers for HR people and people and talent partners to try and retain, leverage, attract all those people. So what advice do you have when it comes to communicating the impact and the ROI that these programs have, and getting approval for those programs? How can we arm our audience here to go out to their teams, whether that's finance or their CEO or whomever, and be like, I think this would be really good for us because of XYZ. Like, how do we help people make that pitch?
Yeah, and it's a tough one because when we talk about the past couple of years being unprecedented, it means there's not a lot of historical data, and it's that data that a CFO would really like to be able to look at to say, oh well, this is historically what does it look like, this is what the future looks like, and therefore XYZ. So it's kind of an opportunity, unfortunately or fortunately, for an HR folks to put on their CFO hat and really kind of crunch out the numbers. What is the ROI of this? And kind of build a little business case for their CFO. And what we do at Benefi, we provide like a little cost of employee churn calculator that they can use. Super helpful for a number of different programs because they're able to sit down and say, okay, cost of losing an employee, on at the current rates is this, and this is the expected impact of this program. Therefore, it's the savings of Y, and that tends to be a good conversation when introducing a new program to the folks who kind of hold all the beans. But yeah, and then kind of generating any other evidence that they can through case studies, and an evidence-based approach tends to be what a lot of those folks look for. Does that hold true with what you guys are seeing at Gusto as well?
Yeah, definitely. And we recommend our clients kind of do the same thing, like build the business case, look at what the cost is for inaction, like what's happening now and what is it costing the organization, and what will, in our case, a recognition program actually do, like, and then showcase, like, when employees feel recognized and they're recognized X amount of times per week, their engagement goes up, and if engagement goes up, retention goes up, and if and then you can kind of like build it, like, if we boost retention by 5%, then we can see this much cost savings, and we're only spending this much in recognition, or in your case, retention bonuses, or whatever it may be, whatever it is. We're not talking about one thing or the other, but it's really whatever piece of the program is going to work best for your organization. I think that's also the key, is like every HR person knows their organization best. So how do you build programs?
Tyler has linked the churn calculator in the chat. Tyler, thank you. That's super helpful. Yes, free tool. If anyone would like to calculate the cost of employee churn, it's right there. Free to use. Please go ahead. And I've been called out for my use of bean counters. Samina, yes. Hopefully the finance people on the phone aren't going to be too angry about it.
Yeah, I mean, they do an important job, and we wouldn't be here without them, because they make sure that the company is profitable and continues to grow. So
yes,
we love our finance people. We really do. But I think the other piece of that is like, one thing that we always recommend to our clients as well is that, like, maybe start small and expand. Of like is there like a department or a region or a store or somewhere where you can launch a pilot program and show the success, because then the risk level goes down dramatically. It's like, I'm not talking to do this with all 10,000 of our employees. I'm asking to do this with just this one store, which is 500 employees. And if it works there, then we can kind of work out the kinks and see where the problems lie, and then expand from there. And so that's one thing that we've really tried to, like, also encourage our clients to do, is like, if you're getting a lot of pushback on this thing, maybe start with a pilot program somewhere in your sphere of influence, and then go from there.
I know your audience probably knows everything that Gusto does. I may have brought some people today who might not know it well. What's the summary of what you guys do?
Yeah, it is recognition for the front line. So you've got frontline employees, you've got a corporate office. How do you make sure that everyone in your organization has a seamless experience with employee recognition and rewards? So whether they're on the factory floor or the store floor, or they're sitting behind a computer all day long with a corporate email, how do you make sure that both of those segments of your population have a great experience when it comes to employee recognition?
Doesn't sound like the easiest thing, and I know historically a lot of companies have not done that super well.
No, there's really no one else who's doing recognition for the front line specifically. Lots of companies have recognition programs and points programs and all those different things, but very few are really focusing on this, what I would say, a very neglected population in the world when it comes to HR tech in a lot of ways.
Love it.
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of like pitching up to the executives, and say you get your program approved and you launch it out. Now, every HR person knows how hard it is to manage that change of a new program and boost the utilization rates to show the success, because that's ultimately what you want to do, right? I want to show success. I want to hit that like 50, 70% utilization rate to show that this is working for people, they enjoy it, and then I'm getting good feedback on it. What would you recommend for, people like myself to make sure that our employees are really utilizing the benefits that we're putting out in place? What does that communication strategy look like? How do you make sure that your clients that you're working with are communicating this in the best way possible?
Yeah, and this is a tough one. I'll be honest. A very early form of Benefi was kind of a usage-based benefit that helped people get affordable loans, and we couldn't make it work for this very reason. We actually learned some really hard lessons about, communicating in the right way. And interestingly, we've kind of gone all the other way because a signing bonus or an education bonus, education as a benefit, tend to be communicated at the offer level. Like about this thing when you're getting a job, and it's actually a real reason for excitement. It's actually a real reason to join the organization because the company's going to pay for a college degree for you, or you're getting a 5K signing bonus, which you've already mentally spent. So the usage rate of those things tend to be really high. But some of the hard lessons we learned through the original version of Benefi were communication needs to be like super clear about the reason and the reason the company is offering this thing. And I think about like an EAP as a great example. Like an EAP, every company should have one. They tend to have really, really low usage rates, but when you need it, man, are you ever glad that it is there? And think about everything holistically that an EAP does. Having that in place when you're in the scenario where you need to use your EAP, you're really glad it's there. So finding a way to leverage company communication channels in an unobtrusive way to remain top of mind seemed to be kind of a good way to reinforce the right kind of behavior. You want to kind of let the employees know in an unobtrusive way that this thing exists. It's here for you. Your company likes you. And finding a way to balance that kind of regular reinforcement that this exists, we're here for you, but also kind of not getting in the way of, taking too much share of attention from other core critical business functions seems to be the balance that needs to be struck. Does that sound, is that what you're seeing at Gusto as well?
Yeah, I think you touched on it, like that regular reinforced communication. Like I think a lot of the times we roll out programs, we have the big announcement, the big hoopla of like, look at this new thing that we're doing, it's great. But then there's no follow-up. There's no like continuous education and continuous conversation about it. So I think you really hit it, like, you gotta talk about this regularly. I always say to my founders and my managers, they're like, I've said this before. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't said it 7 times. If you haven't said it 7 times, it doesn't actually exist. So someone has to hear the thing that you say 7 times. And not always even at that point will it fully permeate their consciousness.
Sorry, what did you just say?
The 7 times.
Sorry, it's a joke.
7 times, Patrick. I'm going to say it 7 times. 7 times, Patrick.
Yeah, I love that. And communication is usually important as well. I've seen some companies roll out things like health programs, and sometimes the pushback includes things like, well, what are you going to do with the data? And is this really an opportunity for you to learn about me and collect data about me? And if I don't adhere to the program, is it a reason to potentially fire me in the future? So, being really clear about what the program is, what it does, why it exists, and, what's happening with the data. Data transparency seems to be an issue these days. Seems to be all part of making sure everyone's aligned and setting them up for, the right kind of usage of the platform.
I love that you brought that up, because that's, I think, again, as HR people, we don't always think about that little piece, that like security data piece. We think about like the impact it's going to have on people's lives. But you're so right. It's like people are so concerned about their data, and especially with things like health programs, mental health programs like EAP. Like, is my employer going to know that I'm like talking to a counselor for depression? Is that going to get me on the chopping block to be fired?
Yeah.
And so really reassuring people and presenting it to them in the plain speak, not the legal speak, of like, this is what's going to happen. Like, we have zero access to your data, and here's how it's being processed and how it's being stored and how it's being secure, and doing all that kind of stuff, I think is a great point that we need to do more of just like, this is how we're keeping the very vulnerable information that you're sharing safe. And, you know, there's laws in Canada and there's laws in the US and different states and in Europe about all of that. People just don't always know. And so presenting it again to them in that clear communication that they can understand.
Yeah, I love that. It feels like a baseline strategy. If you don't have that, the program's never going to be successful.
Yes. Yeah. And really, yeah, reinforce it as much as you can and have that sort of single source of truth that people can access really easily, of like, here's what all of the things that you have access to. I know there's been, you know, times in my life and times with companies that I've worked with where the EAP program has, like you said, like, its utilization rate is very, very low. And then you see something happen either out in like the greater world where there's been some sort of negative event happening, and you see that spike up, and you can see that like, oh, people do know that this exists, they are utilizing it. And it's sort of one of those things where like, it's great that people are using it, but also, oh man, do we need to maybe like try and see if there's other things we need to be doing to mitigate any stress or mental health issues that are popping up in the organization.
I love that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things you may not realize it's there until you really need it. But once you do need it, you ever need it. So I'm glad a lot of companies have been including that as part of their benefit packages.
Yeah, it is one of those silver linings that came out of COVID. I think mental health was brought to the forefront in a much more meaningful way. Yeah, and before I forget, I want to call out. You mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation, like fertility benefits and how that's becoming a bigger thing for people. I know that we've just started working with a company called Sprout Family Planning or Sprout Family or Sprout Benefits. I can't remember. They're based in Toronto.
Yeah, I know Sprout.
Yeah, Sprout. Yeah. So so far have had an amazing experience. So if anyone on the call is kind of looking for something like that to help, they're a great provider. They're fairly new, but they are doing some great work in that space as well. So Sprout, check them out. They're awesome. Maybe somebody can drop a link in one of the chats somewhere. But yeah. And so a reminder, if you have any questions about total awards, compensation, anything like that for myself or Patrick, drop it in the chat. Let us know. But one question that I'm going to like sort of throw at you, and I don't think we've actually talked about this one, Patrick, beforehand. So, but I would say that you know, what is the sweet spot that you see, and maybe this is different per industry, and I'm sure it is, or level, but like, what's that sweet spot? And I'm going to specifically get into sort of your area of expertise for those sort of offer bonuses, retention bonuses. Like, does it have to be a certain percentage of salary? Does it have to be a certain number? Like, what is that number, that magic number that you sees the highest impact, but at the lowest cost to the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question, and unfortunately, I have to hedge my bets by saying it depends. It's very industry dependent, and there's a big difference between, let's say, a law firm, which historically heavy users of signing bonuses and not outside. I mean, they would often write themselves 50, 100K, 150K signing bonuses, depending on your seniority. So very large, substantial signing bonuses. You know, in some cases, 50 or 100% of salary is enough to get you in the door. But then, you know, what COVID has done is democratize the signing and retention bonus. And if you get on Indeed or LinkedIn Jobs and Google signing bonus or sign-on bonuses, you'll see, you know, 8K for nurses, you know, 8K or 10K for like garbage truck driver, you know, 3K for front desk at a Holiday Inn. And, you know, some of our clients are offering, you know, little 1 or 2K ones to overcome some of those barriers to employment that we talked about earlier. If you need to, you know, move or put first and last month's rent down on an apartment, it's kind of a nice way to overcome that barrier, especially if you're someone who's fresh out of school. So unfortunately, it is a little bit of art and science. It depends on the tightness of the labor market. It also depends on what your current retention rates look like and what sort of outcome you'd really like as an organization. If you're averaging 6 months right now, and you'd like to offer a signing bonus with potentially a retention clause, and you'd like to push somebody to 2 years, bonus should be pretty substantial, a higher percentage of an annual salary to get you there, as opposed to trying to get someone to, a year or average tenure. Um, Signing bonuses tend to make employment a little sticky. It makes competitive poaching a little more difficult. So again, art and science is unfortunately my answer.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And like, it's nice to see here that like it is becoming much more widespread in the market, and more companies are using it and utilizing it. And I think it speaks to what we were talking about earlier. Like they're meeting people where they're at, and there's that flexibility approach. And like, not everyone's going to get the partner law firm signing bonus of your annual salary all at once. They're going to get the like, here's 3,000 because we know it's going to be there's going to be a bit of a transition from your previous employer, but we respect that, and we want to show that we actually do value you joining the team.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And whether or not you're offering education as a benefit, which is one of our core uses, or a traditional signing bonus, what it really does is it gives you the opportunity to improve your hiring talent pool. It'll get somebody in the door and give your organization the opportunity to really retain them. Like if you've really crafted a holistic total rewards package, what these things do, signing bonus or education benefit, get somebody in the door, and we'll get them to stick around a little longer for you to be able to hook them with great culture, great work-life balance, great total rewards package, as a route to keeping them as a longer-term employee. I think a lot of us are really, really sick of the very thin hiring pools over the past couple of years, the really rapid turnover in the first 6 months. And, those are the problems that Benefi helps a company solve.
Cool. I love it. And just sort of like a final question of like, are you seeing, or are companies advertising this like on their careers page with a like, this is why we do this? Or is it per job posting? Like, like there's like, what are you seeing people do? Are they like crafting like a bit of an employer brand around this type of benefit? And are they like really pushing that narrative?
Yeah, the education's benefit piece is fairly new, and we're working with employers to figure that side out. And it tends to be on the careers page, or sorry, the as an employer page. Benefits of working here tends to be where that lives, because it tends to be kind of a blanket company wide opportunity, and speaks an awful lot to the culture of your organization. That we want to level you up as an individual, and create a career pathway for you. Tends to be kind of a company wide conversation. Signing retention bonuses are a little more ad hoc. They depend on kind of the role and the difficulty in finding folks for that particular role. So they tend to be more on the kind of the job offer level.
Cool. Awesome. Love it. Love it. Well, I don't have any other questions. Does anybody else on? We'll kind of start wrapping things up. If anyone who's watching has a question, please drop it in the chat so we can see it. And then we'll kind of go from there. But like first, I just want to say thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you all coming in. I hope you found it insightful. I hope you're all coming away with something. I want to say thank you to Patrick for coming in and sharing your expertise and kind of what you're seeing out there in the industry. Oh, we're getting one from Samina. I wanted to hear more about what you can do for the front line that tends to be low paid. Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, Patrick, let's jump into this.
Yeah, so frontline, and I think Noah, you had a really great comment about this earlier. Tends to be like it feels like an industry that has been relatively neglected over the past couple of years, and that seems to be changing now, considering how difficult it has been to find and keep these folks. There's been a shift for folks looking for fully on premises work, to remote or hybrid wherever they can get it. So fully frontline on-prem folks have been really hard to find for a lot of industries over the past couple of years. And what's also challenging is that historically, I think a lot of companies have had the luxury of feeling, oh, well, frontline is a little bit disposable. We don't care that much if they leave, because there's always an infinite hiring pool of folks who can replace them. And I think a lot of organizations have really had to rethink that strategy recently, because it hasn't been an infinite pool, and it's been a lot harder to find. So, for interestingly, I hate to keep bringing up signing retention bonuses. Even like the local Wendy's or McDonald's or Tim Hortons have been offering signing bonuses to get people in the door, which I think is really interesting. So that's one way to get people in and essentially suggest that they stick around a little bit longer. But I also actually want to bring up education as a benefit, because we're seeing, especially in the United States, this thing taking off in a big way. Big firms like Chipotle, Google, um, Walmart, and others are now starting to offer the opportunity to learn something, to get a college degree for somebody in return for retention, or in some cases not. And it tends to be a major driver for getting people in the door. Apparently, for 40% of applicants, education as a benefit was the reason for joining the company. So it's a pretty big motivator for someone to apply, and structured in the right way, it's also a pretty big motivator for someone to stick around. And for a lot of frontline workers, you know, people are different. There's different segments within employees, but for a lot of frontline workers, they don't want to be a frontline worker forever. They would like a pathway to learn something, to evolve, and potentially find a leveled up career either within their own organization or even somewhere else. And finding a smart way for a company to provide that kind of education, I think, is an opportunity for many organizations.
I love it. And I think like we've spoken to this of like, if you can provide career growth for folks and show them a path to success, and like, yeah, you're a cashier one day, but if you stick with us for 4 years, we know that through this education program, you'll get a degree. And with that degree, we can move you to this new role, which is either with corporate or you're getting to work remotely at this point now because you're doing software, whatever it may be. I think that really, really helps. I'm going to touch a little bit on this as well of like, that tends to be low paid. Yes, 100%. Some of our clients have kind of tackled this in a couple of ways. One, they've really empowered their managers to do more spot bonuses, like on like almost instant spot bonuses. So it's like, okay, manager for store or hospital or factory X, you've got, let's say it's 5,000 a quarter to just drop on people in $500 increments when you see them doing amazing work. And it's treated as like a spot bonus. It's almost less of a recognition program. It is a recognition program, but it's more of a like, just like, here's how your spot bonuses are going to be paid out this year for you to control them and empower the manager to do that because they know the work the best. And so when people see that, they feel it. And if you can make it happen across the like sort of the team in a pretty holistic way, people will feel that come in and be like, okay, great. Like I can now spend this $500 on, maybe getting ahead on a little bit of debt, or, that rattle in my car that I've wanted to take care of for the last 6 months, but haven't been able to. Now I can do that. I can go take it to the mechanic. So there's things like that. I'm going to bring up Jason's question here of like, and it gets cut off a little bit, but hear about those same work groups when the cost of living is outpacing the compensation beyond what a small org can sustain. So I think we've all seen this with the crazy inflation over the past couple of years. And I know a lot of organizations in their compensation philosophies or policies say they don't chase inflation. They don't do it because they don't want to have to give everyone a 10% raise. But what would you recommend for those frontline industries to, again, be creative with helping people sort of live their lives and meet their needs when you can't always just give them more money to match inflation?
Yeah, and this is a tough one. And I say that because we know, I think it's something like 60 to 70% of companies across Canada are planning on offering wage increases this year. And the number one reasoning behind that is to address market fluctuations, which is really inflation. Um, and, certainly budgets are continuing to increase, but they don't seem to match inflation. So this is actually a really common problem that most companies are experiencing, where inflation seems to be outpacing the essentially the budget for keeping employees. Now, the market sentiment seems for employees seems to be a little more tempered, where they're recognizing that, yeah, I might be looking for a job right now, but I might not actually find one somewhere else. This isn't necessarily an opportunity for just say, oh, well, it's our market now. We're not going to offer increases to employees. But it does take a little bit of the pressure off for employers. It isn't as hot a market on the employee side that it was 24 months ago or 12 months ago. So I would kind of respond by saying, time to maybe ramp up the volume on some of those other components of your total rewards. Salary is still critically important. It will remain important. You can't ignore it, but it's maybe an opportunity to say, here are all the other things that we offer as an organization, and these are the other reasons why you should stick around. And depending on your organization, Jason, if it's things like, if you're a startup, for example, or a technology company and have options to a stock option pool, it's maybe time to slice off a little piece of that to your employees to reward them. There's other intangible ways to encourage retention. And if not, then it's time to kind of talk about what is your total rewards package, and are there other things beyond core compensation that you can offer to get people to stick around. And in some cases, I hate to say it, you may have to accept that you'll have some attrition. That's as a technology startup, sometimes we can't pay market rates, and there's certain percentage of the work pool or the employee pool that has to pursue their best interest, and if that means going somewhere else, we wish them the very best.
And I think for those frontline industries, I think like being creative with some of the things that you can offer. Like if you're a grocery chain, giving people more discounts on the groceries that they can purchase in store locations and providing things like that. I think you can try and ease that gap in some more creative ways. I think other ways that you can do this is like, again, like really finding ways that you can like alleviate the stress in other ways. So if that's like offering free lunches more often in the break room and providing things like that, those small things I have learned especially for the frontline industries, and this is like a generalization, obviously, but those small intangibles like free office food, lunches, coffees, that goes a long way. And even like breakfast, like if you have like cereals and stuff like that, like people being like, you know what, I don't have to pay for my breakfast this morning. I can go get that at the office and show up 15 minutes early and then go in. Those small little things that, like from a line item, don't cost a lot of money for the corporation, but mean a lot to the individual. Just like, maybe you can't give everyone a 4% raise, but maybe you can give everyone a 3% raise, take that 1% and pump it into like, let's provide people who need it with some relief on like their grocery bill by stocking the office, the break room with more food and lunches and that kind of stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great question from Michelle here. I see you've already pulled it up. I'll half answer this question, then maybe pass it over to you. So spot bonus is if you're issuing cash, then it's a taxable benefit. It's regarded as income. Education as a benefit is not taxable, both in the U.S. and Canada. Canada, there's no cap. In the U.S., I believe it's $5,300 on an annualized basis. You can offer education as a non-taxable benefit. But Noah, what about in your case? If you're offering the rewards you're talking about, is it taxable or no?
It is taxable, and there's weird little rules you can get around it. So like if you're giving someone like an open gift card or cash or something that has a very clear monetary value, it is a taxable benefit. But don't quote me on this part. And as far as the details, you have to. The CRA just changed the rules around this in 2023. But I think if you give someone a specific gift card, so if you gave them a Best Buy gift card or an Amazon gift card or a golf shop gift card, that's a non-taxable benefit, I think. So I think, but double check with your finance team and your accountant. But like if it's cash or has very clear cash value, consider it a taxable benefit and communicate that to people. But education benefits, as Patrick mentioned, do not have are not taxable. I think this is our last question that we can get into, and then we'll have to kind of wrap things up. But we've got another one from Samina. What is the percentage of employees that use the education benefit? Ooh,
Yeah, in our case, it depends a little bit. So we offer the employer options in terms of what the employee has access to. Employer may actually want to select certain topics which are relevant to the organization. If you're an accountancy, you may not want to offer courses in basket weaving. You may want to strictly offer courses which are related to, data and accounting and a bunch of other things like that. Employer has options in terms of what their budget looks like, the kinds of courses offered, and so on and so on. And these options tend to have an impact on the usage rates of what courses people take and the usage rates of the by employees. So unfortunately, I hate to say it varies. It can be very low of 5% or less, and as high as 30. So it depends on what the employer is up for. We've got an organization. They offer their employees a blanket $10K per year to spend on whatever education they want right now, which is great. I love it, but it does also mean there's a lot of employees spending that money on stuff which isn't super relevant to the organization, and also some cases means that once they've completed these courses which the company's paid for, there's no way for them to use it within the organization, and it's actually a trigger for them to go somewhere else, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but an organization tends to want to create a good employee talent pool rather. And so we tend to offer the opportunity to offer some guidelines in terms of the courses that an employee or employer will pay for.
Cool. Awesome. I have that answered. And yeah, thanks everyone for the questions. And yes, Michelle, the CRA makes everything impossible to understand. And I'm sure the IRS is just as bad in the US. But thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate it. Check out Benefi, benefi.com if you want to learn more about them. Connect with Patrick if you want to ask more questions or just kind of chat, learn more about what they're doing. You can connect with me as always on LinkedIn. And if you haven't gotten your 2024 HR calendar, check it out, download it. It's got all of the dates you could ever want, whether it's recognition dates, DEI dates, holidays, cultural celebrations. Check it out, download it. It makes your life a lot easier. And I know I teased a little bit of an announcement when I first started popping this off in some of the groups, but this will be my last webinar with Gusto. I will be moving on from Gusto. And so thank you for the last few years of joining me, listening to me chat, listening to me get to learn with all these people. Julia, who you all know, I'm sure you've all watched her TikToks, her great segments and all the different things that she's doing at Gusto, will be taking over this as well. So look forward to that. I just want to say thank you all for joining me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. But yeah, that's it. Thanks, Patrick, for joining me. And goodbye, everybody. Have a lovely week.
Noah, thanks for a great conversation. Thanks for everyone in the chat. Really enjoyed the conversation today.